The wind howled through the Montana wilderness like a banshee as Jackie stumbled through knee-deep snow, her 8-month pregnant belly making every step a battle. The abandoned cabin was supposed to be just 2 miles ahead, but in this whiteout, she might as well have been walking to the moon. Then she heard it, a low, agonized whimper cutting through the storm. Following the sound, she found him, a massive silver wolf, his leg mangled in a cruel steel trap, golden eyes burning with pain and something else. Intelligence, recognition. Jackie had always felt different, always sensed things others couldn't. Her grandmother's whispered stories about their bloodline suddenly didn't seem so crazy. As she knelt beside the wounded animal, ignoring the screaming cold, the wolf looked directly into her eyes and did something impossible. He spoke her name. Not with words, but somehow she heard it clear as daylight in her mind. The baby kicked hard, as if responding to an ancient call. What was the connection between her unborn child, her family's mysterious past, and this extraordinary wolf? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Jackie's hands trembled as she stared into those golden eyes, her breath forming crystalline clouds in the frigid air. The voice in her head was deep, resonant, and unmistakably real. Jackie Moreau, daughter of the moon's bloodline. "This isn't happening," she whispered, but even as the words left her lips, she knew they were a lie. Her grandmother's stories rushed back, tales of shapeshifters, ancient pacts, and women in their family who could commune with wolves. Stories she'd dismissed as folklore until this very moment. The wolf's breathing was labored, blood staining the pristine snow around the vicious trap. Without thinking, Jackie pulled off her gloves and examined the contraption. The steel jaws had bitten deep into his front leg, and she could see bone beneath the torn flesh. "You must free me," the voice pressed urgently in her mind. "The storm grows stronger, and there are others coming. Hunters who seek more than just wolf pelts." "Others?" Jackie asked aloud, feeling foolish for talking to what anyone else would consider just an animal. But as she spoke, she heard distant sounds, engines growling through the storm, still far off but approaching. The wolf's eyes narrowed. "Men who know what I am, what you are. Your child carries the bloodline stronger than any in 3 generations." Jackie's hands moved to her belly protectively. The baby had been restless all day, kicking and turning as if sensing something she couldn't understand. Now she wondered if her daughter, she somehow knew it was a girl, had been responding to this wolf's proximity. Working quickly despite her numb fingers, Jackie found the trap's release mechanism. Her grandmother had taught her about such things during their walks in these very woods years ago. "Never know when you might need to free something that's been caught," the old woman had said with knowing eyes. The metal was frozen and resistant, but desperation gave Jackie strength she didn't know she possessed. As she worked, the wolf watched her with an intensity that made her feel exposed, as if he could see straight through to her soul. "Your grandmother spoke of you often," he said, his mental voice growing weaker. "She knew this day would come." "You knew her?" Jackie grunted, putting all her weight into prying the trap apart. "Ilara Moreau was my pack's guardian for 60 years. When she passed last autumn, we feared the bond would die with her. But you're stronger than she ever was." The trap suddenly gave way with a metallic shriek. The wolf's leg came free, and he immediately began licking the wound. To Jackie's amazement, she could swear the bleeding was already slowing. "Thank you," he said, attempting to stand. "But we must go. Now." The engine sounds were closer now, and Jackie could make out headlights cutting through the snowfall. Her abandoned car was probably what had drawn them here in the first place. "I can't run," Jackie said, gesturing to her belly. "I can barely walk in this snow." The wolf struggled to his feet, favoring his injured leg but managing to stand. "Then we don't run, we hide." Before Jackie could ask what he meant, the wolf moved closer to her. When their skin made contact, the world exploded into sensation. Warmth flooded through her despite the freezing temperature, and suddenly she could sense things beyond her normal perception. The approaching vehicles, 3 of them, carrying men with weapons and strange instruments that hummed with unnatural energy. The forest around them, alive with creatures taking shelter from the storm. And something else, a network of power that seemed to flow through the very ground beneath their feet. "Welcome to your true sight," the wolf said. "Now follow me. There's a place they cannot track us." Jackie found herself moving with surprising grace, despite her condition, following the wounded wolf deeper into the wilderness as the first shouts of their pursuers echoed behind them. The wolf's eyes never left Jackie's face as she worked to free the cruel metal teeth from its leg. Each movement sent tremors through the massive creature, but it remained eerily still, as if understanding her intent. The blizzard raged around them, turning the world into a whirlwind of white, yet in this small pocket of time, everything felt suspended. "Easy," she whispered, her breath forming clouds in the frigid air. "I'm trying to help." The trap was old but well-maintained, its spring mechanism tight and unforgiving. Jackie's fingers, already numb from the cold, struggled with the release lever. She could see where the metal had bitten deep into the wolf's leg, dark blood staining the snow beneath them. The animal should have been thrashing, should have been trying to bite her, but instead it watched her with an intelligence that made her skin prickle. When the trap finally gave way with a sharp click, the wolf didn't immediately flee. Instead, it struggled to its feet, favoring the injured leg, and took a single step closer to Jackie. She found herself looking directly into those amber eyes, and for a moment the world tilted. Images flashed through her mind, running through moonlit forests, the taste of fresh snow, the scent of pine and earth, and something else, something familiar yet impossible to name. The baby kicked hard against her ribs, jolting her back to reality. The wolf was already limping away, disappearing into the storm as if it had never been there at all. Only the bloody trap and the disturbed snow proved the encounter had been real. Jackie struggled to her feet, her pregnancy making the simple movement awkward. The storm was worsening, and she realized with growing alarm that she could no longer see the lights from her cabin. The wind had erased her footprints, and in the swirling chaos of snow, every direction looked the same. Panic began to rise in her throat. She'd lived in these woods for 3 years, had walked these paths countless times, but the blizzard had transformed everything into an alien landscape. She picked a direction and began walking, each step requiring tremendous effort as she plowed through the deepening snow. The cold was seeping through her coat now, finding every gap in her defenses. Her fingers were beyond numb, and she could no longer feel her toes. The baby seemed to sense her distress, moving restlessly within her. She pressed one hand to her belly, trying to offer reassurance she didn't feel. "We're going to be fine," she said aloud, though her words were immediately swallowed by the wind. "We just need to find the cabin." But with each passing minute, that seemed less likely. The storm showed no signs of abating, and her strength was beginning to fail. She thought of David, probably just now discovering her empty studio, beginning to worry. He'd search for her, she knew, but in this weather, even he might not find her in time. A low howl cut through the storm, mournful and wild. Jackie stopped, straining to listen. The sound came again, closer this time, and she felt an inexplicable pull in its direction. Against all logic, she began moving toward the sound. The howling continued, seeming to guide her through the maze of snow-laden trees. She followed it blindly, trusting an instinct she couldn't explain. Her legs were shaking from exhaustion and cold, and she stumbled frequently, but still the sound drew her forward. When the warm glow of her cabin's windows finally appeared through the storm, Jackie nearly wept with relief. She looked back toward where the howling had come from, but heard only the wind. Whatever had guided her home was gone. She burst through the front door in a cascade of snow and frigid air. David was there immediately, pulling her into his arms, his face tight with worry. "Jesus, Jackie, where were you? I've been searching for an hour." "There was a wolf," she said through chattering teeth, as he helped her out of her snow-crusted coat. "Caught in a trap. I had to help it. David's expression shifted from relief to concern. A wolf? Are you sure it was safe? Did it hurt you? No, it was strange, David. It didn't act like a wild animal. And when I got lost in the storm, something led me home. I think it might have been... You got lost? David's hands moved to her face, checking for signs of frostbite. Jackie, you could have died out there. Both of you could have died. As if responding to his words, the baby gave another strong kick. Jackie placed her hands on her belly, feeling the life moving within her. The encounter with the wolf felt like a dream now, here in the warmth and safety of their home. But the memory of those amber eyes remained vivid, along with the strange sensation that something fundamental had changed in those moments in the storm. Outside, the wind howled with voices that sounded almost human, and Jackie couldn't shake the feeling that her life had just taken a turn towards something she couldn't yet understand. The wolf limped behind Jackie through the deepening snow, its breath creating ghostly puffs in the frigid air. Every few steps it would pause, amber eyes scanning the white wilderness as if listening for something only it could hear. Jackie pulled her coat tighter around her swollen belly, grateful for the animal's surprisingly steady presence as they navigated the treacherous path home. The storm had intensified, transforming familiar landmarks into alien shapes. Pine trees bent under the weight of accumulated snow, their branches creating an overhead canopy that blocked what little daylight remained. Jackie's boots crunched rhythmically against the frozen ground, each step sending sharp pains through her lower back. She pressed one hand against her abdomen, feeling the baby's restless movements. Almost there, she whispered, though she wasn't certain if she was reassuring herself, her unborn child, or the wounded creature following in her wake. The wolf's ears twitched at her voice. It moved with surprising grace despite the injured paw, occasionally brushing against bare tree trunks to mark their passage. There was something deliberate about its movements, as if it knew exactly where they were headed. The thought sent an inexplicable chill down Jackie's spine that had nothing to do with the biting wind. When the outline of her cabin finally emerged through the swirling snow, Jackie felt her shoulders sag with relief. Warm yellow light spilled from the windows, and smoke curled invitingly from the chimney. She quickened her pace, then stopped abruptly when she realized the wolf had halted several yards behind her, its massive form nearly invisible against the darkening forest. "Come on," she called softly, patting her thigh. "You can't stay out here." The wolf's golden eyes fixed on the cabin with an intensity that made Jackie's breath catch. For a moment, something flickered across its features, recognition perhaps or remembrance. Then it padded forward, following her up the wooden steps to the covered porch. Jackie fumbled with frozen fingers to unlock the door, acutely aware of the animal's warm presence behind her. The lock finally gave way, and she pushed inside, immediately enveloped by the blessed warmth of the wood-burning stove. The wolf hesitated at the threshold, one massive paw poised on the doorframe. "It's okay," Jackie murmured, stepping aside. "Come in." The creature entered slowly, its claws clicking against the hardwood floor. It paused in the entryway, nostrils flaring as it took in the mingled scents of the space. Wood smoke, herbal tea, and something else. Something that made its hackles rise slightly before settling again. Jackie shrugged out of her snow-covered coat and hung it on a peg by the door. When she turned back, she found the wolf standing in the center of her living room, staring intently at the collection of framed photographs on the mantelpiece. Its tail was rigid, ears pricked forward with laser focus. Following its gaze, Jackie felt her heart skip. The wolf was staring directly at a particular photo, one of her grandmother, Elena, taken decades ago in this very cabin. In the picture, the elderly woman stood on the front porch, her silver hair caught in sunlight, wearing the same distinctive pendant that now hung around Jackie's neck. "That's my grandmother," Jackie said quietly, her hand instinctively moving to touch the carved stone that rested against her collarbone. "She lived here before me." The wolf's head swiveled toward her with startling speed, its gaze dropping immediately to the pendant. A low whine escaped its throat, not threatening, but something that sounded almost like recognition, or grief. Jackie's pulse quickened. Did you know her? The absurdity of asking a wolf such a question hit her even as the words left her mouth, but the animal's reaction was unmistakable. It approached slowly, each step deliberate and careful, until it was close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from its thick coat. Then it did something that made Jackie's blood freeze in her veins. The wolf bowed its head and touched its nose gently to the pendant. The moment contact was made, the carved stone grew warm against Jackie's skin. Images flashed behind her eyes, fleeting, fragmented visions that made no sense. A woman's voice calling through darkness, the same pendant glowing with ethereal light, and eyes, golden and wild, filled with desperate intelligence. The baby kicked violently, and Jackie gasped, breaking the strange connection. The wolf stepped back, its expression almost apologetic, but those amber eyes remained fixed on her face with an intensity that suggested it had experienced the same inexplicable moment. Thunder rumbled overhead despite the falling snow, an ominous sound that sent both woman and wolf to the nearest window. Outside, the storm raged with renewed fury, but something else moved between the trees, shapes that were too purposeful, too coordinated to be natural. The wolf's lips pulled back in a silent snarl, and a growl built deep in its chest. They weren't alone anymore. Jackie woke to the sound of scratching at her bedroom door, so persistent and rhythmic it pulled her from the depths of exhaustion. The blizzard had finally quieted during the night, leaving behind an eerie silence that made every small noise seem amplified. She glanced at the clock, 5:47 a.m. David's side of the bed remained cold and empty. The scratching continued, accompanied by a low whine that made her chest tighten with unexpected recognition. She struggled to sit up, her pregnant belly making every movement awkward, and wrapped David's robe around her shoulders before padding to the door. The wolf sat in the hallway, its massive frame somehow looking smaller in the confines of her home. Dried mud and melted snow had left dark stains on the hardwood floor beneath its paws. When it saw her, it stood immediately, amber eyes fixed on hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You can't be in here," she whispered, though she made no move to retreat. "David will be home soon." The wolf tilted its head, studying her with what appeared to be genuine concern. It took a careful step closer, then another, until its massive head was level with her swollen belly. Without warning, it pressed its nose gently against the fabric of her nightgown. Jackie froze, every instinct screaming at her to run, but something deeper, something primal and inexplicable, kept her rooted in place. The wolf's breath was warm through the thin material, and she could feel the careful deliberation in its movements, as if it understood exactly how fragile she was. Then, the baby kicked. The wolf jerked back, ears pricked forward in apparent amazement. It looked up at Jackie with what she could only describe as wonder, then gently pressed its nose against her belly again. This time, when the baby responded with another series of kicks, the wolf made a soft rumbling sound deep in its throat, not quite a growl, but something far more complex. "This is impossible," Jackie breathed, but her hand moved of its own accord to rest on the wolf's head. Its fur was coarser than she'd expected, still damp in places from the melted snow, but warm and surprisingly soft beneath her palm. The wolf leaned into her touch, and suddenly Jackie was overwhelmed by a rush of images that weren't her own. Snow-covered forests stretching endlessly in all directions, the scent of pine and earth, and something wild and clean. The feeling of muscles bunching and releasing as powerful legs carried her across frozen ground. The satisfaction of a successful hunt, the warmth of a pack sleeping close together under starlight. She gasped and stumbled backward, her hand flying away from the wolf's fur. The images vanished instantly, leaving her dizzy and disoriented. The wolf watched her with those ancient amber eyes, and she had the unsettling feeling it had experienced the same thing she had. A car door slammed in the driveway. David's voice carried through the front door as he spoke to someone, probably thanking the neighbor who'd given him a ride home. Jackie's heart lurched into her throat as she looked down at the wolf, which showed no signs of panic, despite the approaching danger. "You have to go," she whispered urgently. "Now, through the back door." But instead of moving toward the rear of the house, the wolf stepped closer to her again. It looked directly into her eyes for a long moment, and Jackie felt something shift deep in her chest. A recognition she didn't understand, a connection she couldn't name. Then, moving with surprising grace for such a large creature, it padded past her toward the back of the house. She followed, her bare feet silent on the cold floor, and watched as the wolf approached the sliding glass door that led to the back deck. It looked at her expectantly, and Jackie realized with a start that it was waiting for her to open it. Her hands trembled as she worked the lock and slid the door open. Cold air rushed in, carrying with it the sharp scent of fresh snow and pine. The wolf paused at the threshold, then turned back to her one last time. In that moment, Jackie saw something in its eyes that made her knees weak. Intelligence, yes, but more than that. Recognition. As if it had been looking for her specifically, waiting for her. "Jackie?" David's voice echoed from the front hallway. "Honey, I'm home!" The wolf stepped out onto the deck without a sound, its dark form immediately blending with the shadows cast by the deep snow drifts. Jackie slid the door closed and turned toward her husband's voice, but not before she caught one last glimpse of amber eyes watching her from the tree line at the edge of their property. "Coming?" she called, her voice shakier than she'd intended. But as she hurried toward the front of the house, she couldn't shake the feeling that whatever just happened was only the beginning. The wolf's amber eyes never left Jackie as she moved carefully around the cabin, gathering supplies. Every few minutes she would glance toward the corner where the massive creature lay on a pile of old blankets, its breathing steady but labored. The storm outside had intensified, rattling the windows with such force that Jackie wondered if the glass might shatter. She pressed a hand to her swollen belly, feeling the baby shift restlessly inside her. The little one had been unusually active since she'd brought the wolf home, as if somehow sensing the presence of the wild animal just feet away. It should have been terrifying, having an apex predator in her living space, but instead, Jackie felt an odd sense of completeness, as though something that had been missing had finally clicked into place. The wolf's leg was healing faster than should have been possible. When Jackie had first cleaned the wound 3 days ago, she'd been certain the metal trap had caused permanent damage. The gashes had been deep, the bone possibly fractured. Yet now, as she knelt beside the animal with fresh bandages, she could see that the flesh had knitted together with remarkable speed. The swelling had gone down considerably, and when she gently probed the area, the wolf barely flinched. "How are you doing this?" she whispered, running her fingers through the thick silver-grey fur. The wolf's ears twitched at the sound of her voice, and those intelligent eyes fixed on her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. There was something almost human in that gaze, a depth of understanding that wolves simply shouldn't possess. Thunder rolled across the mountain, though Jackie realized with a start that the sound was different from the usual rumble of a storm. This was deeper, more rhythmic, almost like distant drums. The wolf's head shot up, ears pricked forward, and a low whine escaped its throat. The animal struggled to rise, favoring its injured leg but clearly agitated by whatever it was hearing. "Easy, easy," Jackie soothed, placing a gentle hand on the wolf's flank. "You're safe here." But even as she spoke the words, she wondered if they were true. The drumming sound grew closer, and now she could swear she heard voices carried on the wind. Not the random howling of the storm, but actual human voices, chanting in a language she didn't recognize yet somehow understood at a bone-deep level. The baby kicked hard against her ribs, and Jackie gasped at the sudden sharp pain. The movement was so violent it nearly knocked her off balance. She wrapped both arms around her belly, breathing deeply as the sensation passed, but the infant continued to squirm as though trying to escape. The wolf was on its feet now, despite its injury, pacing toward the window with a pronounced limp. Its hackles were raised, and a growl rumbled low in its chest. Jackie followed, peering out into the swirling snow, but she could see nothing beyond the white curtain of the blizzard. Then the chanting stopped. The sudden silence was more unnerving than the strange sounds had been. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath, and the only sound was the rapid beating of Jackie's heart and the wolf's panting beside her. She placed her hand on the animal's back, feeling the tension coiled in its powerful muscles. A knock at the door made them both jump. It was a slow, deliberate sound, 3 measured raps that seemed to echo through the cabin with supernatural resonance. Jackie's blood turned to ice water in her veins. No one should be out in weather like this. No one could have made it up the treacherous mountain road in these conditions. The wolf pressed against her leg, no longer growling but radiating a protective energy that was unmistakable. Whatever stood outside that door, the animal considered it a threat. Jackie Thorne. The voice that came through the thick wooden door was melodious and distinctly feminine, but there was something otherworldly about it that raised every hair on Jackie's arms. "We know you're in there. We know what you've done." Jackie's mouth went dry. How did they know her name? How did anyone know she was here? She'd told no one about the cabin, had deliberately chosen this isolated place precisely to avoid unwanted visitors. "We've come for what belongs to us," the voice continued, and now Jackie could hear others murmuring in agreement, though she still couldn't see anyone through the window. "Return the guardian, and no harm will come to you or your child." The wolf's ears flattened against its head, and it looked up at Jackie with what she could only interpret as an apology. Understanding flooded through her with crystalline clarity. These people hadn't come for her. They'd come for the wolf, and somehow, by freeing the animal from that trap, she had stepped into the middle of something far more dangerous than she could have imagined. The baby gave another violent kick, and Jackie doubled over with a gasp of pain. The howling started at sunset, just as Jackie was ladling soup into bowls for dinner. The sound cut through the wind outside, primal and haunting, making her hands tremble so violently that broth splashed across the counter. Marcus looked up from his newspaper, frowning. "Probably just the storm," he said, but his voice carried uncertainty. "Wind through the eaves." Jackie knew better. She'd heard that exact howl 3 nights running now, always at the same time, always from the same direction, the forest where she'd freed the massive wolf. Each night the sound seemed closer, more urgent, as if calling specifically to her. "I'm going to check the windows," she murmured, setting down the ladle. The baby kicked hard against her ribs, responding to her elevated heart rate. Moving through their small cabin, Jackie peered through each frost-covered pane. Snow continued falling in thick curtains, but she could see nothing beyond the immediate glow of their porch light. Still, she felt watched. The sensation crawled along her spine like ice water, raising goosebumps despite the warmth from their wood stove. The howl came again, definitely closer this time. Marcus appeared beside her, his hand finding the small of her back. "Jackie, you're shaking." His touch was gentle, concerned. "What's wrong?" How could she explain the pull she felt toward that sound? How could she tell him about the wolf without sounding insane? The creature had been enormous, unlike any wolf she'd studied in her wildlife biology courses. Its eyes had held an intelligence that defied explanation, and when she'd freed it from the trap, she'd sworn she felt something pass between them, a recognition that went beyond mere gratitude. "Just nerves," she lied, forcing a smile. "The baby's been active today." Marcus nodded, accepting the explanation, but his eyes remained troubled. "Why don't you rest? I'll finish dinner." Jackie retreated to their bedroom, but rest was impossible. The howling continued sporadically throughout the evening, each call seeming to resonate in her bones. When she finally dozed near midnight, her dreams were filled with running through snow-laden forests, her feet somehow sure and swift despite her pregnancy. In the dream, she wasn't afraid. She was answering a summons that felt as natural as breathing. She woke to silence. The storm had passed, leaving behind a crystalline stillness that made the world beyond their windows look like a fairy tale. Marcus was already up, probably checking their generator and clearing snow from the walkways. Jackie dressed quickly and stepped outside. The cold bit at her cheeks, but the morning sun on fresh snow was breathtaking. Everything sparkled as if dusted with diamonds. She was admiring the way light caught in the icicles hanging from their roof when she saw them. Tracks. Massive paw prints leading from the forest edge directly to their cabin, circling the building twice before heading toward the back porch. Jackie followed the trail, her heart hammering. The prints were enormous, far larger than any normal wolf should leave, and perfectly formed despite the previous night's snowfall, which meant they were recent, very recent. At the back porch, she found something that made her breath catch. Arranged carefully on the bottom step were 3 objects: a rabbit, freshly killed and still warm, positioned as if offered. Beside it lay a cluster of evergreen boughs, woven together with an intricacy that seemed almost deliberate. And strangest of all, a smooth river stone, perfectly round and warm to the touch despite the freezing temperature. What the hell? Marcus's voice behind her made Jackie jump. She turned to find him staring at the arrangement, his face pale beneath his winter beard. "Gifts," she whispered, the word escaping before she could stop it. "Gifts?" Marcus stepped closer, examining the items without touching them. "What kind of animal leaves gifts?" The baby kicked again, harder this time, and Jackie felt that same strange pull she'd experienced in the forest. Something deep in her genetic memories stirred, knowledge she didn't understand but somehow recognized. Her grandmother's stories suddenly felt less like folklore and more like forgotten truth. "We should bring them inside," she heard herself say. "Jackie, no. We don't know what—" "We should bring them inside," she repeated, her voice carrying an authority that surprised them both. Without waiting for his response, she bent awkwardly and gathered the offerings. The stone pulsed with warmth in her palm, and the evergreen boughs released a scent that made her feel dizzy with familiarity. Marcus caught her elbow as she straightened. "This isn't normal behavior for you." He was right, and that terrified her. But the terror was mixed with something else. Anticipation, recognition, as if she was finally becoming who she was always meant to be. "Nothing about this winter has been normal," she replied, cradling the gifts against her chest. The baby settled immediately, as if calmed by their presence. From the forest came a single soft howl, not mournful this time, but satisfied, approving. Jackie smiled despite her fear. The ancient bond was strengthening, and there was no turning back. The ancient leather journal felt warm beneath Jackie's fingertips, as if it had been waiting decades for her touch. She carefully opened it on the kitchen table while Thomas paced behind her, his footsteps echoing the restless energy that had consumed him since dawn. Outside, the blizzard continued its relentless assault, but inside their cabin, a different kind of storm was brewing. "My grandmother's handwriting," Jackie whispered, recognizing the elegant script that flowed across the yellowed pages. She'd seen it countless times on birthday cards and recipe notes, but these words carried a weight she'd never encountered before. "Listen to this, Thomas. The binding blood runs true through the women of our line, each generation called to honor the covenant, made in desperation and sealed in love." Thomas stopped pacing. "Covenant? What kind of covenant?" Jackie's eyes moved quickly across the page, her heart racing as the implications became clear. "It's talking about the Northwood Pack, about a debt that's been passed down through our family for over a century." Her voice caught as she read further. "Oh my God, Thomas, my great-great-grandmother, Elena. She was dying in childbirth during a particularly harsh winter. The wolves saved her life, and in return, she promised that her bloodline would always answer when the pack faced extinction." The baby kicked hard against Jackie's ribs, as if responding to the revelation. She placed her hand over her belly, suddenly understanding the strange pull she'd felt toward the wolf in the trap, the inexplicable certainty that helping him had been more than just an act of kindness. "That's why you couldn't leave him there," Thomas said softly, the pieces falling into place. It wasn't really a choice, was it? No, Jackie admitted, turning another page. According to this, each generation of women in my family has been awakened, I guess you could call it. When the pack needs protection, something inside us responds. We become their guardians, their bridge between the wild world and human civilization. She looked up at her husband, seeing her own amazement reflected in his eyes. The wolf I saved. He's not just any wolf. He's the last pure-blooded alpha of the original Northwood pack. Thunder crashed overhead, but it wasn't the storm. Heavy paws on their roof announced the return of their unexpected guest. Thomas moved to the window, peering through the frost-covered glass. He's back, been circling the property since before sunrise, like he's standing guard. Jackie continued reading, her grandmother's words painting a picture of a world she'd never imagined existed alongside her ordinary life. Stories of women who could communicate with the pack, who served as healers and protectors during times of crisis. Women who had sacrificed comfort and safety to ensure the survival of something ancient and irreplaceable. There's more, she said, her voice barely audible. The bond. It's not just spiritual. During times of great need, the Alpha and the Guardian can share strength, share life force itself. That's how my great-great-grandmother survived her difficult labor. The pack leader at the time gave her some of his vitality. She placed both hands on her swollen belly, and that's why this baby, why our child is so important. The journal says the bond grows stronger with each generation, and this baby will be born during the pack's darkest hour. Thomas sat down heavily in the chair across from her. What does that mean exactly? What are we supposed to do? Before Jackie could answer, a low howl rose from somewhere nearby, followed by another, then another. The sounds weren't coming from their roof anymore, but from the forest surrounding their property. Jackie struggled to her feet, moving to the window beside her husband. Through the swirling snow, she could see shapes moving between the trees. Dozens of them, grey and silver shadows that seemed to materialize from the storm itself. The rest of the pack, she breathed. They've come. The wolf on their roof responded with a howl of his own, deep and commanding. Jackie felt something shift inside her chest, a warmth that spread outward from her heart like ripples in still water. The baby kicked again, more insistently this time, and she gasped as a strange certainty filled her mind. They're in danger, she said, though she couldn't have explained how she knew. There are hunters coming, not just anyone, people who know what they're hunting. People who want to destroy what's left of the pack before the bond can be completed. Thomas grabbed their coats from the hooks by the door. Then we need to warn them. Get them to safety. Jackie shook her head, still staring out at the assembled wolves. Their eyes gleamed like stars in the darkness, all focused on her with an intensity that should have been frightening, but instead felt like coming home. No, Thomas, we need to fight. That's what the covenant means. That's what my family has always done when it mattered most. The baby gave one more strong kick, and Jackie smiled despite the danger gathering around them. Looks like our child is ready to be born into this new world. The storm had passed, leaving behind a crystalline world that glittered under the pale morning sun. Jackie stood at her kitchen window, cradling a cup of steaming tea, watching the wolf, Fenris as she'd begun calling him, move through the deep snow with surprising grace despite his healing leg. 3 days had passed since she'd freed him from the trap, and still he remained, as if tethered to her property by invisible chains. Her phone buzzed against the counter. Marcus again. She'd been avoiding his calls since the night of the rescue, unable to explain the strange pull she felt toward the creature outside, or the vivid dreams that had plagued her sleep. Dreams of running through moonlit forests on 4 legs, of howling at stars that seemed to sing back. You can't keep ignoring the world forever, she murmured to herself. But even as she reached for the phone, movement outside caught her attention. Fenris had stopped near the tree line, his massive head turned toward the forest. Every muscle in his body had gone rigid, ears pricked forward in alert attention. Jackie set down her tea, pressing closer to the window. She couldn't see what had captured his focus, but the wolf's entire posture radiated tension. Then she heard it, the distant rumble of engines growing closer. Snowmobiles. Fenris melted into the shadows between the trees with fluid precision, disappearing so completely that Jackie might have imagined his presence entirely. Moments later, 3 snowmobiles roared into her clearing, their riders bundled in heavy winter gear. She recognized the lead figure immediately. Tom Morrison, a local hunter whose reputation for persistence was matched only by his cruelty. Jackie grabbed her coat and stepped onto the porch, one hand instinctively moving to rest on her swollen belly. The baby had been restless all morning, as if sensing her growing unease. Tom pulled off his helmet, revealing a weathered face and cold grey eyes that swept across her property with calculating intensity. "Morning, Jackie. Heard you might have seen something unusual the last few days." "Depends what you consider unusual, Tom." She kept her voice steady, though her heart hammered against her ribs. "It's been pretty quiet since the storm." "Tracks," said one of his companions, a thin man Jackie didn't recognize. "Wolf tracks. Big ones. Trail leads right up to your cabin." Tom's gaze fixed on Jackie with predatory focus. "Now that's interesting, especially considering old Henrik's been telling stories about the wolf that got away. Says it was massive, unnatural even." He stepped closer, snow crunching under his boots. "Henrik's offering a substantial reward for information leading to that animal, enough to help a young mother get properly settled before her baby comes." The baby kicked hard against Jackie's ribs, and she winced. In that moment of distraction, she caught a flicker of movement in her peripheral vision. Fenris was there, barely visible between the snow-laden pines, but watching, waiting. "I haven't seen any wolves," Jackie said, surprised by how easily the lie rolled off her tongue. "Just the usual deer and rabbits." Tom studied her face, then gestured to his companions. They spread out across the clearing, examining the snow with practiced eyes. Jackie's pulse quickened as she realized they would find Fenris's tracks. There were too many, too fresh to miss. "Well now," the thin man called out. "Looks like someone's been feeding the local wildlife." He pointed to a disturbed area near Jackie's back door where she'd left scraps for Fenris. "These prints are definitely wolf. And fresh." Tom's smile held no warmth. "Jackie, I think you might be confused about what you've seen. Let me help clear things up." He nodded to his companions, who began moving toward the forest edge. "We'll just take a quick look around your property. Make sure you're safe. This is private land, Tom. You need permission to protect a neighbor?" Tom interrupted. "Now, don't be difficult. A pregnant woman out here alone, with a dangerous predator nearby? That's a recipe for tragedy." As if summoned by some unseen signal, Fenris emerged from the tree line. He moved with deliberate slowness, each step calculated to showcase his impressive size, even favoring his injured leg. He stood nearly 4 feet at the shoulder, his thick winter coat making him appear even more massive. His yellow eyes fixed on Tom with unmistakable intelligence and challenge. The 3 men froze, hands moving instinctively toward the rifles slung across their backs. But Fenris made no aggressive moves. Instead, he positioned himself directly between Jackie and the hunters, his presence both protective and warning. "Jesus," whispered one of Tom's companions. "That's no ordinary wolf." Tom's hand had found his rifle grip, but he hadn't drawn the weapon yet. Something in Fenris's steady gaze seemed to give him pause. The wolf's lips pulled back slightly, revealing impressive canine teeth, but he remained motionless as carved stone. Jackie felt something shift in the air around them, like the charged moment before lightning strikes. Her baby kicked again, more insistently, and suddenly she understood that this confrontation would determine far more than Fenris's fate. She stepped forward, placing herself beside the wolf. The old woman's cabin smelled of dried herbs and wood smoke, but underneath lay something else, something wild and ancient that made Jackie's skin prickle with recognition. Elara moved with surprising grace for her age, her weathered hands steady as she prepared tea from leaves Jackie couldn't identify. "You freed him," Elara said without preamble, not looking up from her task. The great wolf. I felt the moment the trap released. Jackie's breath caught. How could you possibly know that? Because I've been waiting for this day for 37 years. The old woman's eyes, pale blue like winter ice, finally met Jackie's. Since the night your mother made her choice. The teacup slipped in Jackie's hands, hot liquid sloshing. My mother? What does she have to do with any of this? Elara settled into the chair across from her, moving slowly, deliberately. Your mother was Sarah Brennan before she married your father, before she tried to run from what she was. Sarah Brennan is dead. Jackie's voice came out flat, mechanical. She died when I was 3. Car accident. She died, yes, but not in any car accident. Elara's voice carried the weight of long-held secrets. She died protecting you from the hunters who discovered what bloodline you carry. The words hit Jackie like physical blows. She pressed her hand to her belly, feeling the baby's restless movement beneath her palm. What bloodline? I don't understand any of this. The Brennan line has been bound to the wolf clans for over 2 centuries, Elara continued, her voice taking on the cadence of old stories told around dying fires. Your ancestor, Moira Brennan, saved the life of a wolf lord during the Great Persecution. In gratitude, he blessed her bloodline. Her daughters would always be able to hear the wolf song to bridge the gap between human and shifter worlds. Jackie's mind reeled. Shifters aren't real. Wolves are just animals, they don't... The wolf you freed is Kieran MacReady, alpha of the Northern Pack, Elara interrupted gently. He's been searching for you since your mother's death, following the bloodline bond that calls to him. The hunters knew this. They used him as bait. This is insane. Jackie stood abruptly, pacing the small cabin. I'm a normal person. I work at a veterinary clinic. I don't have any magical bloodline or wolf bonds or... You've always been drawn to wolves, haven't you? Elara's quiet question stopped Jackie mid-stride. Even as a child, your adoptive parents probably thought it was just a phase. The truth of it hit like a cold wave. The wolf documentaries she'd watched obsessively as a child, her inexplicable decision to specialize in wildlife rehabilitation, the dreams that had plagued her for years, running through forests on 4 legs, howling at the moon with a voice that wasn't quite human. The baby, Jackie whispered, her hand moving protectively over her swollen belly. Is it? The bond strengthens with each generation, Elara said softly. Your daughter will be more connected to the wolf clans than you've ever been, which is why the hunters want her dead. Terror flooded Jackie's system. What hunters? Who are these people? An old organization, older than the bloodline bond itself. They call themselves the Silver Cross. They believe any connection between human and shifter is an abomination. Elara's voice hardened. They've been tracking your family for decades. Then I need to run. I need to get as far away from here as possible. Running is what got your mother killed. The old woman's words stopped Jackie cold. She thought she could hide, could live a normal human life. But the bond doesn't work that way. It calls to both sides, human and wolf. Kieran found you because you freed him, yes, but also because your daughter's birth approaches. The connection grows stronger. Jackie sank back into her chair, overwhelmed. What am I supposed to do? I don't know anything about this world, these bonds. I can barely take care of myself. You learn. You accept what you are instead of running from it. Elara leaned forward, her ice-blue eyes intense. And you let Kieran teach you. He's been protecting your bloodline from the shadows for decades. He knew your mother. He can help you survive what's coming. How do you know all this? Who are you really? A sad smile crossed the old woman's weathered features. I'm your great-aunt, child. Moira Brennan was my grandmother. I've been watching over the bloodline as best I can, but I'm old now, and my connection to the wolf song has faded with age. She reached across the table, covering Jackie's hand with her own. You're the strongest the line has produced in generations, but strength without knowledge is just another way to die. Outside, the wind howled through the trees. And Jackie could swear she heard something else in the sound, a call that resonated deep in her bones, wild and free and utterly foreign to everything she thought she knew about herself. The ancient tome felt heavy in Jackie's hands, its leather binding cracked with age and secrets. Grandmother Elena's fingers trembled as she turned the yellowed pages, each one whispering against the next like autumn leaves. The storm outside had finally begun to subside, but inside the cabin, a different kind of tempest was brewing. "Here," Elena said, her voice barely above a whisper. She pointed to an illustration that made Jackie's blood run cold. A woman with her own face, standing beside a massive wolf with silver-streaked fur. The woman in the drawing was clearly pregnant, her hand resting protectively over her swollen belly. "This is impossible," Jackie breathed, studying the intricate details. Every line of the woman's features matched her own, down to the small scar above her left eyebrow. "When was this drawn?" 300 years ago, Elena replied. "By your great-great-great-grandmother, Jacqueline Thorne, the first of our bloodline to forge the bond." The wolf had been pacing near the window, but now he approached them with careful steps. His amber eyes fixed on the book, and a low whine escaped his throat. Elena looked at him with something approaching reverence. "You remember, don't you, old friend?" she murmured. The wolf's massive head dipped in what could only be described as a nod. Jackie felt her world tilting on its axis. "What are you saying? That this wolf is 3 centuries old?" "Time moves differently for those touched by the ancient magic," Elena explained, settling back in her chair with visible effort. "The bond doesn't just connect human and wolf, it extends their lives, intertwines their destinies across generations. When one Thorn woman dies, he waits. Sometimes for decades, sometimes longer, until the bloodline calls to him again." The baby kicked forcefully, as if responding to the revelation, and Jackie gasped. The wolf's ears perked up immediately, his attention shifting to her belly with an intensity that was both protective and knowing. "The child," Elena continued, "carries the strongest manifestation of our gift in generations. I can sense it even now. That's why the bond activated so powerfully when you freed him from the trap. Your daughter has been calling to him since the moment of conception." "Daughter?" Jackie's hand instinctively moved to her stomach. She and Marcus had chosen not to learn the baby's gender, wanting to be surprised. Elena's weathered face softened into a smile. "The gift only passes through the women of our line. It's always been daughters, Jackie. Strong, fierce daughters who become guardians of the ancient pact." The wolf moved closer still until he was sitting directly beside Jackie's chair. When she looked down at him, she saw something that took her breath away. Not just intelligence in those amber depths, but love, devotion that transcended human understanding. This creature had waited decades for her birth, had somehow known she would need him. "What happened to my mother?" Jackie asked, the question scraping against her throat like broken glass. The truth this time. Elena's composure finally cracked. Tears began flowing down her cheeks as she stared at the book's faded pages. Sarah was meant to inherit the bond when she turned 25. It's always been that way. The magic awakens on the 25th birthday, or when a bonded woman becomes pregnant, whichever comes first. But Sarah... She paused, struggling with the words. She was afraid, terrified of what she might become. The wolf let out a mournful howl, and Jackie felt an echo of that grief resonate in her chest. The sensation was so overwhelming she had to grip the chair's armrests to steady herself. "She tried to break the bloodline," Elena whispered, "used a ritual she found in another book, one that promised to sever the magical connection forever. But the magic, it fought back. It consumed her from the inside out, trying to maintain the bond even as she rejected it. Jackie felt sick. She died because she didn't want this. She died because she didn't understand that fighting our nature only destroys us. The bond isn't a curse, Jackie. It's a calling. Our family has protected something ancient and vital for 3 centuries. We guard the balance between the human world and the wild places that still hold the old magic." The wolf pressed his massive head against Jackie's leg, and warmth flooded through her. Not just physical heat, but emotional comfort. Through their connection, she felt his memories flickering like candle flames, generations of Thorn women, all sharing his strength, all adding their own courage to an unbroken chain of guardianship. "What exactly are we protecting?" Jackie asked. Elena closed the book carefully, as if it contained explosives rather than ink and paper. "Tomorrow, when the storm has fully passed, I'll show you the boundary stones. You'll understand then why our family was chosen, and why your daughter will be the strongest guardian we've ever known." The baby kicked again, and this time the wolf's tail wagged slightly, as if he could sense the movement. Jackie realized with crystal clarity that her old life, the one where she was simply a pregnant woman married to a park ranger, was over forever. The old woman's cabin felt smaller with each passing moment, the walls seeming to press closer as Ilara's words settled into Jackie's mind like stones dropping into still water. The baby shifted restlessly in her arms, as if sensing the weight of revelation hanging in the air between them. "My grandmother never spoke of any curse," Jackie said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "She told me stories, but they were just stories." Ilara's weathered hands moved deftly as she prepared tea, the familiar ritual seemingly the only normal thing in a world that had tilted sideways. "Your grandmother was protecting you. The women of your line have always carried this burden, but Catherine hoped it would end with her." She paused, setting down the kettle with deliberate care. She was wrong. Through the frosted window, Jackie could see Fenris pacing the perimeter of the clearing, his massive form cutting dark paths through the snow. Even at this distance, she felt the pull of their connection, a silver thread that seemed to vibrate with each of his steps. "Tell me about the bond," Jackie demanded, surprising herself with the steel in her voice. "All of it." Ilara settled into the chair across from her, the firelight casting dancing shadows across her lined face. "Your bloodline stretches back to the time when the veil between worlds was thinner. Your ancestor, Moira Brennan, was a healer who saved a dying wolf during the harshest winter anyone could remember. But this was no ordinary wolf. He was a guardian, one of the ancient ones tasked with protecting the boundaries between our world and the realm of shadows." The baby's tiny fist curled around Jackie's finger, and she felt an odd comfort in that simple touch as Ilara continued. "The wolf was wounded in battle with something that should never have crossed into our realm. Moira's healing magic didn't just save his life, it bound their souls together, creating a connection that would echo through generations. The bond was meant to ensure that her descendants would always have a guardian when the shadows stirred again." "But why now?" Jackie asked. "Why did Fenris find me?" "Because the barriers are weakening," Ilara said grimly. "Can't you feel it? The wrongness in the air, the way the forest holds its breath? Something has been testing the boundaries for months now, probing for weakness. Your pregnancy made you vulnerable, created a resonance that called to him across the miles." Jackie's mind reeled. She thought of all the strange dreams she'd had during her pregnancy, visions of running through moonlit forests, of howling that seemed to come from her own throat. She'd attributed them to hormones and stress, but now, "The baby," she whispered. "What does this mean for her?" Ilara's expression softened. "The bond doesn't always pass to the next generation. Sometimes it skips decades, even centuries, but given the timing of her birth during such upheaval," she shook her head. "It's too early to know." A low growl from outside made them both look toward the window. Fenris had stopped pacing and now stood rigid, his attention fixed on something beyond the tree line. The hair along his spine bristled like silver needles. "Something's coming," Ilara said, rising swiftly from her chair. She moved to a cabinet and withdrew a leather pouch, her fingers working quickly to loosen its ties. "I had hoped we'd have more time." "What is it?" Jackie clutched the baby closer, every instinct screaming danger. "Shadow spawn," Ilara replied, spilling the contents of the pouch onto the table. Herbs, crystals, and what looked like fragments of bone clattered across the wooden surface. "They're drawn to the bond, to the power it represents. If they can corrupt it—" She didn't need to finish. Jackie could feel Fenris's alarm through their connection. a sharp spike of protective fury that made her own pulse quicken. Outside, the temperature seemed to plummet even further, and the wind carried something that wasn't quite sound, a whisper that made her skin crawl. "What do we do?" Jackie asked, surprised by her own calm. She should be terrified, but instead she felt oddly centered, as if some deep part of her had been waiting for this moment her entire life. "We fight," Elara said simply, sweeping the herbs into patterns Jackie didn't recognize, but somehow understood. "You, Fenris, and the old magic that flows in your veins. Your grandmother may have tried to bury it, but it was never truly gone." The baby gurgled softly, and for just a moment, Jackie could have sworn she saw something ancient and knowing flash in those dark eyes. Then Fenris's howl shattered the night, a sound of challenge and defiance that seemed to shake the very foundations of the cabin. Jackie stood, cradling her daughter against her chest, and felt power surge through her like lightning finding a conduit. Whatever was coming for them would find more than just a frightened woman and her child. They would find the awakening of something that had slept too long. The ancient stone chamber beneath the cottage felt alive with whispered secrets as Jackie pressed her palm against the cold wall. The symbols carved into the rock seemed to pulse with a faint blue light, responding to her touch like living things awakening from centuries of slumber. Fenris stood beside her, his massive form tense with anticipation, yellow eyes reflecting the ethereal glow. "My grandmother knew," Jackie whispered, tracing the outline of a wolf's head etched into the stone. "She knew what I was, what I would become." The revelation hit her like a physical blow. All those bedtime stories about wolves and forest spirits, the way her grandmother had always seemed to understand the wild things that others feared. It hadn't been mere folklore. It had been preparation. Fenris padded closer, his breath warm against her shoulder. Through their bond, she felt his ancient memories stirring, fragments of a time when the barrier between human and wolf was thin as morning mist. She saw flashes of her ancestors, women who had run beneath the moon with wolves at their sides, protectors of an old covenant that most of the world had forgotten. "The Blackwood family has always been the guardians," she said, understanding flooding through her. "That's why the hunters came for you. They know what you represent." A low growl rumbled from Fenris's throat, and through their connection Jackie felt his pain, not physical but the deep ache of loss. He had watched his pack fall one by one to silver bullets and iron traps, seen the old ways crumble as humans forgot their connection to the wild. He was the last of his kind, carrying the weight of an entire lineage on his shoulders. The baby kicked hard against Jackie's ribs, as if responding to the charged atmosphere around them. She gasped, one hand flying to her swollen belly, and suddenly the symbols on the walls blazed brighter. The child could feel it too, the magic, the ancient power that flowed through these hidden chambers like an underground river. "She's connected to this," Jackie breathed, wonder and fear warring in her voice. "The baby, she's part of it all." Fenris pressed his massive head against her stomach, and Jackie felt a jolt of recognition pass between wolf and unborn child. The bond wasn't just between her and Fenris, it was generational, stretching forward into a future she was only beginning to understand. Footsteps echoed from above, heavy boots on wooden floors. Jackie's blood turned to ice as she recognized the measured pace. Marcus had found them. "Down here," came a gruff voice she didn't recognize. "The tracks lead to the cottage." More hunters. Jackie's heart hammered against her ribs as Fenris's lips pulled back in a silent snarl. Through the bond, she felt his readiness to fight, to die protecting her if necessary. But the chamber suddenly felt like a trap rather than a sanctuary. "There has to be another way out," she whispered, running her hands along the walls, searching for hidden passages. Her grandmother had been too clever to build a refuge with only one entrance. Fenris moved to the far corner of the chamber, nose to the ground. His tail swept once, and Jackie understood. She followed him to where a narrow crack split the stone wall, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. Cold air whispered from the opening, carrying the scent of snow and pine. "Jackie Blackwood!" Marcus's voice boomed from above. "We know you're here. Come out and we'll make this easy." She almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Easy for whom? These men had come to destroy something precious and ancient, something her family had protected for generations. There would be nothing easy about surrendering to them. The crack in the wall led to a natural cave system that wound deep into the mountain. Jackie squeezed through, her pregnant belly making the passage difficult, while Fenris transformed into shadow and smoke to follow. The magical ability still amazed her, watching a creature of flesh and bone become something ethereal, then solidify again on the other side. The caves were a maze of tunnels carved by centuries of underground water flow. Jackie moved by instinct and the faint pull of Fenris's presence ahead of her, trusting that he knew where they were going. Behind them, she could hear the hunters discovering the hidden chamber, their angry shouts echoing off stone walls. "They'll follow us," she panted, one hand pressed to her side where a stitch burned. Fenris paused, looking back at her with eyes that held too much intelligence for any ordinary wolf. Through their bond, she felt his plan forming. Dangerous, desperate, but perhaps their only chance. He would lead the hunters away, draw them deep into the mountain where his knowledge of the terrain gave him advantage, but it would mean separating, breaking the bond that had become her lifeline. "No," Jackie whispered, understanding flooding through her. "We stay together." But Fenris was already moving, already making the choice to protect her and the child she carried. The future of both their kinds depended on it. The ancient oak's roots seemed to pulse beneath Jackie's feet as she stood in the grove's center, her newborn daughter cradled against her chest. The wolf, Fenris as he'd called himself, circled the perimeter with restless energy, his silver eyes reflecting the ethereal light that emanated from the standing stones surrounding them. "The ritual must be completed before dawn," Fenris said, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. "Your daughter's transformation window is closing." Jackie's grandmother emerged from the shadows between the stones, her weathered hands carrying a wooden bowl filled with what looked like starlight made liquid. "I should have told you sooner, child. Should have prepared you for this moment." "Prepared me for what, exactly?" Jackie's voice cracked with exhaustion and fear. The past 3 days had been a whirlwind of revelations, discovering her family's lineage as guardians of an ancient pact, learning that her rescue of Fenris had awakened dormant magic in her bloodline, and now this mysterious ritual that would supposedly protect her daughter from forces she barely understood. Her grandmother's eyes softened. "The Moonshard Pack has been hunting our family for generations, seeking to break the binding spell your ancestor placed on them. Your daughter carries the strongest guardian magic we've seen in 200 years. Without the protection ritual, they'll sense her power the moment she takes her first steps." Fenris stopped pacing and fixed his gaze on Jackie. "The pack that destroyed your great-grandmother's village still roams these mountains. They've grown stronger, more ruthless. I've been their prisoner for decades, forced to hunt the very bloodline I was meant to protect." Jackie felt her daughter stir in her arms, tiny fingers grasping at the air as if reaching for something invisible. "And this ritual will keep her safe. It will mask her scent and magical signature until she's old enough to defend herself," her grandmother explained, approaching with the glowing bowl. "But it requires a blood bond between guardian and protector, between your family line and his." The implications hit Jackie like a physical blow. "You mean Fenris and my daughter will be connected for life," Fenris finished, his expression grave. "I will be bound to protect her, and she to channel the ancient magic that keeps the darker packs at bay. It's the same bond your ancestor forged with my predecessor before the corruption spread through our kind." Through the trees, Jackie caught glimpses of yellow eyes watching from the darkness. The Moonshard Pack had found them. She counted at least 6 sets of eyes, maybe more, circling the sacred grove like vultures waiting for their moment to strike. "They can't enter the circle while the stones remain active," her grandmother said, following Jackie's gaze. "But their power is growing. We have maybe an hour before they can break through." Jackie looked down at her sleeping daughter, so peaceful and unaware of the supernatural war brewing around her. 3 days ago, Jackie had been a simple woman living a quiet life, her biggest concern being whether she'd have enough firewood for the winter. Now she stood at the center of an ancient battlefield, holding the key to either salvation or destruction. "What happens if I refuse?" she asked quietly. Fenris's ears flattened against his head. "The pack will take her. They'll corrupt her magic, turn her into a weapon against everything your family has protected for generations. The boundary between the human world and the shadow realm will collapse. And, if I agree, your daughter will never live a normal life," her grandmother admitted. "She'll be powerful, protected, but always walking the line between two worlds, always in danger." A howl echoed through the night, closer than before. The yellow eyes were growing bolder, testing the edges of the protective circle. Jackie could feel their hunger, their rage, pressing against the magical barrier like a tide against a crumbling seawall. Her daughter opened her eyes then, looking directly at Fenris with an awareness that seemed impossible for a newborn. The wolf approached slowly, lowering his massive head until he was eye-level with the infant. Something passed between them, a recognition, an understanding that transcended species and age. "She's already chosen," Fenris murmured, wonder creeping into his voice. "I can feel it. The bond is trying to form naturally." Jackie's grandmother nodded urgently. "The bloodline recognizes him. We must complete the ritual now before the natural bonding process attracts more attention." Another howl split the night, this one from multiple throats in harmony. The sound made Jackie's bones ache with its otherworldly power. Through the trees she saw shapes moving, not just wolves, but creatures that defied description, things that belonged in nightmares rather than forest groves. Jackie looked at her daughter one more time, memorizing the perfect curve of her tiny nose, the way her fingers curled like flower petals. Then she looked at Fenris, seeing not just the wolf who had upended her world, but the guardian, who might be their only hope. "Tell me what I need to do." The ancient cave stretched deeper into the mountain than Jackie had imagined possible. Her footsteps echoed off stone walls carved with symbols that seemed to pulse with their own inner light, responding to her presence. Beside her, the massive silver wolf moved with purpose, his amber eyes fixed on the darkness ahead. "How much further?" Jackie whispered, though she wasn't sure why she felt the need for quiet in this sacred place. The wolf's thoughts brushed against her mind, clearer now than ever before. "Not far. The heartstone waits where it has always waited, where your grandmother last touched it." The mention of her grandmother sent a chill through Jackie that had nothing to do with the cave's temperature. Every step forward felt like walking deeper into a family history she'd never known existed. The bond between them hummed stronger here, as if the mountain itself was feeding their connection. They rounded a bend, and Jackie gasped. The passage opened into a vast circular chamber, its domed ceiling disappearing into shadows above. But it wasn't the size that stole her breath. It was the light. In the center of the chamber, set upon a natural pedestal of white stone, sat a crystal the size of a human heart. It pulsed with warm golden light that seemed to breathe with a rhythm all its own. "The Heartstone," Jackie breathed. "Yes, and we are not alone." Jackie's eyes adjusted to the chamber's ethereal glow, and she saw them. Wolves, dozens of them, arranged in a perfect circle around the Heartstone. Their eyes reflected the crystal's light like stars, and each one radiated the same ancient power she felt in her companion. Some were silver like him, others black as midnight, russet as autumn leaves, white as fresh snow. All were massive, all were watching her with an intelligence that made her soul ache with recognition. "The pack," her wolf explained, and she could feel his deep emotion. "Those who have waited. Those who remember the old bonds." An enormous black wolf with graying around his muzzle stepped forward from the circle. His mental voice was deeper, older, weighted with centuries of wisdom and sorrow. "Daughter of Elena, you have come at last. You knew my grandmother. It wasn't a question. I was bound to her, As your guardian is bound to you, as my father was bound to her mother and his father before him, the bloodline of the guardians, unbroken for 3,000 years. The math made Jackie's head spin. 3,000 years of this bond, this connection between her family and these magnificent creatures. But why? Why us? Why them? The ancient wolf padded closer, and Jackie felt no fear, only a deep, abiding sense of rightness. Because your line carries the gift, the ability to bridge the worlds of man and wolf, to hear our thoughts, to share our strength. And because with that gift comes responsibility. Around them, the other wolves began to stir, their voices joining in a harmony that filled Jackie's mind rather than her ears. They spoke of shadow creatures that prowled between worlds, of ancient evils that sought to tear apart the barriers between realms, of guardians both human and wolf who had stood watch for millennia. "The Heartstone is failing," her silver wolf said, his anguish bleeding through their bond. "Without it, the barriers weaken. The shadow things grow bold. Soon they will break through entirely." Jackie stared at the pulsing crystal, and now she could see it, the cracks running through its surface, the way its light flickered like a candle in wind. "What does it need?" "A guardian's willing sacrifice," the black wolf replied gravely. "A life freely given to restore its power. Your grandmother understood this. She came here, in the end, when she felt death approaching. But she was too weak, too far gone." The Heartstone accepted her offering but could not be fully restored. The baby kicked hard in Jackie's belly, as if sensing her racing thoughts. "You're asking me to die?" "We ask nothing," the silver wolf said fiercely. "The choice must be freely made or it means nothing. But know this, if the barriers fall, if the shadow creatures break through, your child will grow up in a world of darkness and horror such as you cannot imagine." Jackie pressed her hand to her stomach, feeling the strong, steady movements of the life within her. Around her, the wolves waited in perfect stillness, their ancient eyes holding depths of sorrow and hope that made her want to weep. She thought of her grandmother's journal, the cryptic entries that now made terrible sense. Elena had known this day would come. She'd prepared as best she could, leaving clues for Jackie to follow. But in the end, the choice was hers alone. The Heartstone's light flickered again, weaker this time. In that moment of dimness, Jackie could swear she saw something else in the chamber's shadows, dark shapes with hungry eyes, pressing against invisible barriers, waiting for their chance to break through. Her silver guardian moved to stand beside her, his warmth a comfort against the growing cold. "Whatever you decide, I will stand with you. As I stood with Elena, as my kind has always stood with yours." The ancient stones of the ritual circle pulsed with ethereal light as Jackie stepped forward, her newborn daughter cradled against her chest. The wolf, her wolf, stood beside her, his silver coat gleaming in the supernatural glow that emanated from the carved symbols etched deep into the granite. Around them, the blizzard had stilled to an unnatural calm, as if the very elements recognized the gravity of what was about to unfold. Elder Moira's weathered hands trembled as she held the ceremonial blade, its obsidian surface reflecting the dancing lights. "The blood debt must be acknowledged," she intoned, her voice carrying across the clearing with surprising strength. 3 generations have passed since your grandmother broke the covenant. Tonight, it ends." Jackie felt the weight of centuries pressing down upon her shoulders. The revelation of her family's betrayal still burned fresh in her mind, how her grandmother had stolen the pack's sacred moonstone, how that theft had cursed both bloodlines to suffer in isolation. The wolf pack, once noble guardians of the forest, had been reduced to savage creatures of instinct. Her own family had endured generation after generation of women dying in childbirth, a price paid for breaking sacred trust. "Tell me what I must do," Jackie said, though fear clawed at her throat. Her daughter stirred in her arms, tiny fingers grasping at the air as if reaching for something unseen. The wolf moved closer, his amber eyes meeting hers with an intelligence that still took her breath away. when he had first revealed his true nature during the blizzard. Speaking directly into her mind through their bond, she had thought she was losing her sanity. Now she understood it was the opposite. She was finally seeing clearly. "The moonstone lies hidden where your grandmother drew her last breath," Elder Moira continued. "But returning it alone will not be enough. The bond between your bloodlines was severed with treachery. It can only be restored through willing sacrifice." Jackie's heart hammered against her ribs. What kind of sacrifice? The wolf's mental voice whispered through their connection, warm and reassuring despite the gravity of his words. "Not death, little mother, but change. The bond your grandmother broke was not merely ceremonial, it was part of the very fabric that holds the balance between our worlds. To restore it, you must accept what she rejected." Understanding dawned like cold fire in Jackie's veins. "The transformation," Elder Moira nodded gravely. "Your grandmother was offered the chance to become a bridge between human and wolf, to serve as guardian alongside her bonded mate. Instead, she chose to steal power rather than earn it through sacrifice. The curse that followed has poisoned both our peoples ever since." Jackie looked down at her sleeping daughter, memorizing the perfect curve of her cheek, the delicate flutter of her eyelashes. If she accepted this burden, what would it mean for her child? Would she still be the mother her daughter needed? The wolf pressed his muzzle gently against her free hand. "Our bond was forged when you chose compassion over fear, when you freed me from the trap despite the danger to yourself. That act of mercy awakened something that has slept for 3 generations. You have already begun to change, can you not feel it?" She could. The heightened senses that had been growing stronger since that night in the blizzard, the way she could perceive the emotions of others like scent on the wind, the strange dreams where she ran through moonlit forests on 4 legs instead of 2. The transformation was not something that would be done to her. It was something that had already begun. "If I do this," Jackie said slowly, "my daughter will be safe. The curse will be lifted." "More than safe," Elder Moira promised. "She will be blessed. The child of a guardian carries gifts beyond imagining. She will walk between worlds as easily as breathing, understanding languages spoken by wind and water, protected by both human laws and pack loyalty." The wind began to stir again, carrying with it the howls of distant wolves. Jackie realized they were not cries of pain or rage, but songs of hope. The pack was calling to her, welcoming her home to a place she had never been but somehow always known. She thought of her grandmother, young and frightened, faced with the same choice. Fear had driven that decision. Fear of losing her humanity, of becoming something her own kind would never understand. But Jackie had already walked that path of isolation. She had lived her whole life feeling like an outsider, sensing there was something more waiting just beyond her reach. "I accept," she whispered, and the words rang out like a bell across the clearing. The moment her decision was spoken aloud, power surged through the ritual circle. The carved symbols blazed with silver light, and Jackie felt the ancient magic settling into her bones like coming home. The wolf's joy flooded through their bond, pure and overwhelming. The transformation had begun, and with it, the healing of wounds that had festered for too long. The ancient chamber beneath the mountain pulsed with ethereal light as Jackie pressed her hand against the crystalline altar. The moment her palm touched the cold surface, visions flooded her mind like a torrential river breaking through a dam. She saw her grandmother as a young woman standing in this very chamber, her hand joined with a magnificent silver wolf whose eyes held the same ancient wisdom as Fenris. "The bloodline awakens," whispered a voice that seemed to come from the stones themselves. Jackie gasped as the truth unraveled before her. Generations of her family had been bound to the wolf guardians, protectors of an ancient magic that kept darker forces at bay. Her grandmother had been the last keeper until she'd chosen love over duty, breaking the bond to marry Jackie's grandfather. Fenris stood beside her, his massive form trembling as the same visions coursed through their shared connection. "Your grandmother thought the threat had passed," he rumbled, his voice heavy with centuries of waiting. "She was wrong. The shadow wolves have been growing stronger, feeding on the imbalance her departure created. Jackie's hand moved instinctively to her swollen belly as another contraction rippled through her. The baby was coming, and somehow she knew this timing was no coincidence. Everything was connected. Her pregnancy, the blizzard that led her to Fenris, even Marcus finding them here in this sacred place. The child, she breathed, understanding flooding through her. That's why they want the baby. A child born of the bloodline during the convergence of realms, Fenris confirmed. Your daughter will be more powerful than any keeper before her. In the right hands, she could restore the balance. In the wrong hands, he didn't need to finish. Jackie had seen enough in the visions to understand what the shadow wolves intended. They would corrupt her child, use her power to tear down the barriers between worlds, unleashing chaos that would consume everything. The chamber shuddered as howls echoed from the tunnels above. Marcus appeared at the entrance, his face grim. They've found us. There are dozens of them, and they're not alone. They've got people with them. Humans who've made pacts with the shadow realm. Jackie doubled over as another contraction seized her, stronger than before. The baby was coming whether they were ready or not. Fenris nuzzled against her shoulder, his warmth a comfort against the overwhelming fear threatening to consume her. There's another way, he said softly. The ritual can be completed even now, before your daughter is born. You can take your grandmother's place, restore the bond that was broken. But Jackie, what? She gasped between waves of pain. The keeper cannot leave this realm. You would be bound here, guardian of the threshold between worlds. You would never see the human world again. Marcus stepped forward, his jaw set with determination. Then we fight our way out. We get Jackie and the baby somewhere safe, find another solution. There is no other solution, Fenris replied sadly. The convergence happens tonight. If the bond isn't restored, if the barriers fall, there will be nowhere safe for any of us. The howls grew closer, accompanied now by the scrape of claws on stone and voices speaking in languages that predated human civilization. Jackie felt her daughter stirring within her, responding to the ancient magic that filled the chamber. Even unborn, the child was already reaching toward her destiny. How long? Jackie asked through gritted teeth. How long would I have to stay? Until your daughter comes of age, until she can take the burden from you. Fenris's golden eyes met hers. 20 years, perhaps 25. Marcus knelt beside her, taking her free hand in both of his. Jackie, no, we'll find another way. There has to be. Look at me, she interrupted, her voice steady despite the pain. Really look at me, Marcus. From the moment I freed Fenris from that trap, did any part of this feel like coincidence to you? He was quiet for a long moment, studying her face in the crystal light. She saw the moment he understood, the way his shoulders sagged as he recognized the truth she'd already accepted. You were born for this, he whispered. We all were. You found us in that blizzard when we needed you most. You led us here when everywhere else was compromised. You think that was luck? The first shadow wolf appeared in the tunnel entrance, its red eyes burning with malevolent hunger. Behind it, more shapes moved in the darkness, wolves and humans alike, all touched by the corruption of the shadow realm. Jackie squeezed Marcus's hand one final time, then placed both palms flat against the altar. The crystal blazed with brilliant white light as she spoke the words that came to her as naturally as breathing, ancient syllables that her blood remembered, even if her mind did not. I accept the burden, she declared, her voice echoing with power that made the mountain itself tremble. I claim the bond that is mine by right. The ancient chamber trembled as the truth settled over Jackie like a shroud. Her grandmother's journal lay open before her, its pages yellowed with age and secrets. The wolf, her wolf, stood beside her, silver eyes reflecting the flickering torchlight that danced across stone walls carved with symbols she now understood. The bloodline must be protected, she whispered, reading her grandmother's spidery handwriting. The guardian bond passes from mother to daughter, but only when the old wolf falls and the new one rises. Thunder crashed overhead, shaking dust from the ceiling. The storm that had brought them together was nothing compared to the tempest brewing now. Through the chamber's single window, she could see shapes moving in the darkness, hunters with silver bullets and ancient grudges, drawn by the awakening of powers that had slumbered for decades. Her hand instinctively went to her swollen belly. The baby kicked as if sensing the danger, and suddenly everything clicked into place. The constant fatigue she'd blamed on pregnancy, the way animals had begun approaching her fearlessly, the dreams of running through forests on 4 legs instead of 2. "You knew," she said to the wolf. "You knew what I was becoming." The great beast lowered his massive head, a gesture that somehow conveyed both apology and inevitability. The trap that had caught him hadn't been random, it had been bait, set by those who understood the old ways. They had known she would come. They had counted on her compassion. Heavy footsteps echoed in the tunnel, leading to the chamber. Jackie's heart hammered against her ribs as she recognized her husband's voice among those approaching. Marcus had found her, but he hadn't come alone. "She has to be down here somewhere," Marcus called out, his voice tight with worry and something else, fear. The tracker said the wolf's scent led this way. "Your husband brought friends." The voice came from behind her, smooth as silk and twice as dangerous. Jackie spun to find a woman emerging from the shadows, silver hair gleaming and eyes like winter frost. "How touching that he cares enough to lead the council of hunters straight to you." The wolf's hackles rose, a low growl rumbling from his throat. Jackie had never seen him show fear before, but this woman, this creature, made even an ancient guardian step back. "Lydia Blackthorn," Jackie breathed, recognizing the name from her grandmother's warnings. "You're supposed to be dead." "Death is such a limiting concept, don't you think?" Lydia smiled, revealing teeth too sharp to be entirely human. "I've been waiting so long for this moment. 3 generations I've hunted your bloodline, and now here you are, ripe with child and power you don't even understand." The footsteps were closer now. Marcus's voice carried clearly through the stone corridors. "Jackie, please, if you're down here, answer me." "He doesn't know what you are," Lydia observed, circling like a predator. "How delicious. Shall we tell him? Shall we show him what his beloved wife truly is?" Jackie's body began to change without her permission. Pain lanced through her bones as they started to elongate and shift. Her fingernails darkened and curved into claws. The transformation that had been building for months finally demanded release, triggered by stress and proximity to the ancient chamber. "No," she gasped, fighting against her own biology. "Not now. Not like this." But the wolf padded forward, pressing his warm flank against her trembling form. Through their bond, she felt his strength flowing into her, steadying her, showing her how to control the change instead of being consumed by it. The chamber door burst open. Marcus stumbled in, followed by 3 figures in dark clothing carrying weapons that gleamed with silver. His eyes found her immediately, wide with confusion and terror as he took in her partially transformed state. "Jackie?" His voice cracked. "What's happening to you?" "What's happening," Lydia said with evident pleasure, "is that your wife is finally becoming what she was always meant to be, a guardian of the old ways, a protector of secrets that would shatter your small human mind." The baby chose that moment to kick again, hard enough to double her over. The pain triggered another wave of transformation, but this time she didn't fight it. This time she reached for the power flowing through her veins, through the stone walls, through the bond that connected her to the great wolf and to generations of women who had stood as guardians before her. "Run," she told Marcus, her voice already deepening as her throat changed. "Get out of here and run." Because she could smell more hunters in the tunnels above. She could hear the whisper of silver bullets being loaded into chambers, and she could feel her daughter stirring in her womb, already carrying the mark of what they both would become. The final battle had begun. The howl that split the winter air was unlike any sound Jackie had ever heard. Part wolf, part human, and entirely filled with ancient power. Through the cabin's frost-covered windows, she watched as Fenris stood on his hind legs in the clearing, his massive form silhouetted against the swirling snow. The transformation had begun. Silver light poured from his eyes as the curse that had bound her family for generations finally shattered. Jackie felt it break like chains snapping in her chest, the weight she'd carried without knowing suddenly lifting. Her grandmother's pendant, warm against her skin, pulsed with a gentle golden glow before going still forever. "It's done," Marcus whispered from beside her, his own eyes reflecting the silver light. The pack had gathered at the forest's edge, dozens of wolves emerging from the shadows to witness their alpha's moment of choice. The blood debt is paid. Jackie's hand moved instinctively to her swollen belly where new life stirred restlessly. The baby seemed to sense the magnitude of what was happening, kicking with unusual vigor. Through their bond she felt Fenris's gratitude, his relief, and underneath it all, a profound sadness that made her heart ache. The great wolf began to shimmer, his form wavering between beast and something else entirely. Jackie had expected him to transform into a man. That's how the stories always went. But as the silver light intensified, she realized the truth was far more complex. Fenris wasn't becoming human. He was becoming something that transcended both forms, something that existed in the space between worlds. She pushed open the cabin door, ignoring Marcus's protestations, and stepped into the storm. The wind whipped her hair across her face, but she walked steadily toward the clearing where Fenris waited. Each step felt like walking through history itself, past all the years of misunderstanding, past all the fear and prejudice that had created the curse in the first place. When she reached him, the transformation was nearly complete. Fenris stood before her no longer as the massive wolf she'd freed from the trap, but as something magnificent and terrible and utterly other. His form shifted like moonlight on water, sometimes appearing human, sometimes wolf, sometimes something that was purely spirit. Only his eyes remained constant, still holding that ancient wisdom and infinite kindness. "Thank you," he said, and his voice was the wind through the pines, the howl of the pack, the whisper of snow falling on silent earth, "for seeing beyond what I appeared to be." Jackie reached out, her fingers passing through the edges of his shifting form. She could feel him there, solid and real, but no longer entirely of this world. "Where will you go?" "Where I was always meant to be," Fenris replied, turning his gaze toward the forest. "But the bond between us will remain. Your child will know peace where your ancestors knew only fear. The pack will remember your kindness for generations to come." Behind them, Marcus approached slowly, his head bowed in reverence. "The old ways are ending," he said. "We can finally live without the weight of ancient grudges." Jackie nodded, understanding flooding through her. The curse hadn't just bound the wolves, it had trapped her family too, forcing them into a cycle of fear and misunderstanding that had poisoned generations. Her act of mercy in freeing Fenris from the trap hadn't just saved one wolf's life, it had broken a pattern that stretched back centuries. As if sensing her thoughts, Fenris smiled, an expression that worked regardless of which form dominated his shifting appearance. "Your grandmother would be proud. She always believed this day would come, even when hope seemed impossible." The mention of her grandmother brought tears to Jackie's eyes. The pendant at her throat felt different now, no longer a burden, but a reminder of all the women who had carried the weight of the curse before her. She thought of their sacrifices, their fears, their dreams of a better future for their children. "Tell me about her," Jackie said softly. "Tell me about the night everything changed." But when she looked up, Fenris was already fading, becoming one with the storm and the forest and the ancient magic that flowed through all things. His voice came from everywhere and nowhere, carrying on the wind. "That story is for another time, when your child is old enough to understand the difference between justice and vengeance, between fear and wisdom." The pack began to howl then, a chorus that rose and fell like a song of farewell and celebration combined. One by one, they melted back into the forest, following their transformed alpha into whatever new existence awaited them. Jackie stood in the clearing until the last echo faded, her hand on her belly, feeling the future stirring beneath her palm. The blizzard was already weakening, and through the parting clouds she could see the first hint of dawn touching the horizon. A new day was coming, and with it a world where ancient curses held no power and mercy could indeed change everything.